Today we've got a 2014 MacBook Pro with a bad battery. Quoted price to repair between $250 and $400. Fear not, true believers. That's never going to happen. Here's our new battery. Total price $49.95. Link in the description below. It's got everything you're going to need for this project. It's got, well, the battery itself, of course, and the tools you're going to need to take your MacBook Pro apart. That being said, let's get started. First, we're going to need our screwdrivers. You're also going to need some acetone, commonly referred to as nail polish remover. A couple syringes are going to be useful, and a small container to hold all your loose screws. Flip the MacBook over and begin removing all the screws. Keep in mind that the two screws in the center closest to you at the joint of the MacBook are smaller than the rest. With all the screws removed, we can now remove the base plate of the MacBook Pro. It pops off quite easily. Just kind of pry it around the edges and remove it. And, well, you can see, this one's filthy on the inside. We're going to need to clean this before we move on. Let me go ahead and take care of that first. With our MacBook all cleaned up, or as cleaned up as I'm going to get it, the first thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and remove the speakers on each side of the MacBook. These are held in by 3 different screws. And hey, thanks Apple, each one of those screws is a different size. So having said that, let's go ahead and get those screws out of there. Again, keep track of where each one of these came from, because each one of them is just slightly different. With all the screws removed, you can go ahead and kind of peel the speakers back just like this. They'll still be attached by a wire, and you can just kind of fold them back carefully. You can place them kind of just sitting there on the logic board, as long as they're out of the way. Now you're going to want to remove this screw right here. It's actually the only screw that holds the battery in place on this model of MacBook Pro. Go ahead and set that aside. With that screw out of the way and set aside, you can go ahead and undo this one plug here. This is the only plug that attaches the battery to your MacBook Pro. On different models, there are additional screws right along this section here. Remove those if you have that model. Now comes the fun part. We're going to grab our acetone, and we're also going to grab a couple little pieces of plastic like these gift cards here. We're going to use these to pry the batteries loose. This is where those syringes might come in handy. Apply no more than 0.25 milliliters of acetone at a time, as you can see here. This is going to loosen the adhesive underneath the batteries, and we're going to be able to use our little plastic cards to pry them loose. Just use the edge of the plastic card and go ahead and wiggle it under the battery there. This looks a lot harder than it actually is. Once you get the hang of it, these batteries come loose pretty easily. The acetone really does make short work of that adhesive. With that first battery loose, we'll continue to work our way towards the center and then stop at those center 2 batteries and come back from the other side. This is where you apply the acetone on the second battery, right here in this gap, and it'll work its way this direction. Slide a little bit more in under this first battery here at the corner, and just start prying. With this first side completely loose, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the other side and leave the center for last. With both sides completely loose, as you can see here, we're going to move to the center. And now you kind of got to be careful because you're working under the trackpad. Essentially, it's the same process. You go ahead and put some acetone right down between the two center batteries, just like so. Again, no more than 0.25 milliliters. And if you're like me, you're going to have to find a slightly stiffer piece of plastic to remove the center two batteries. They're just stuck on there a lot tighter than the outside ones. But after a little work and a little bit more prying, we finally have success. Careful not to pull out any additional wires. The battery pops loose. Be sure to dispose of that responsibly. A little extra acetone and some Q-tips, and the adhesive is all gone. There's no time to waste, so let's install our new battery. One side's got adhesive, one side doesn't. So, go ahead, line it up, remove the covering of the side with the adhesive on it. Very sticky. And go ahead and set that in place, making sure it lies completely flat. At this point, I could tell you to go back and watch the first half of this video in reverse, but I won't do that. Instead, we're going to go ahead and take our one screw that holds the battery in place and put it in first, just so that we know for sure that our battery is not going to shift. Our battery's locked in place now, so basically all we got to do is start putting all the other things back in order. We'll start with the speakers. Carefully route the wire back where it belongs, under that little clip on that side, and fold the other speaker down on this side, making sure that it rests flush. With those speakers seated, go ahead and begin screwing them back in place with the 3 screws that came out of each one. I'd like to remind you again that each one of those screws is a different size. I hope you kept track of that. With the speakers in place, it's time to go ahead and plug the battery into the logic board. That's this little tab here. All you've got to do is press down on it until you both feel it and hear it click into place. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and remove this plastic from the top of the battery. There's a little tab on each side. Just going to pry that out and go ahead and remove that plastic. There's no worries here because there is no adhesive on this side of the batteries. That's just kind of a protective lining. Now, if you've made it this far, all we got to do is put the cover back on the bottom of our MacBook Pro. Seat it into place, making sure that it lays flat. Nothing's protruding. Line everything up. And let's go ahead and get those screws back in place. But let's hit fast forward. Well, that's it. We're back up and running. Keep in mind that I'm always willing to show you how you can do something, but it's up to you to decide whether you should do something. If you found any value in this video, you know I'd appreciate that thumbs up like. Feel free to follow us on Instagram, where it's all puppies, projects, and the randomness of our amazing world. Thanks for watching, and maybe, just maybe, I'll see you on the next video. If you enjoy videos about the randomness of our amazing world, consider clicking on the globe to subscribe, or maybe checking out one of the other videos right here.